Former Sports Illustrated columnist Steve Rushin is now writing books. His debut novel is called The Pint Man, described as a testament to the transformative powers of a beloved watering hole, the love of a good woman, and a perfectly drawn pint. All right, I can get into that. A woman, a pint, and, welcome.
All you need. Thanks for having me.
So listen, you have one of the best gigs maybe in America. Every young guy out there wants to be a sports columnist at some point. You're writing for Sports Illustrated and decide after a while, hey, I want to leave this and give up books. What's the real story? Why did you leave Sports Illustrated?
Well, I loved every minute of it. I was there almost 20 years, but the last 9, I was writing a weekly column. I had a Sunday morning deadline every week. I had a full head of hair when I started. You can see what that did to me. And you know what column writing is like. It's very much a hamster wheel that is great to be on, but at some point, if you want to do something else, I was writing 800 words every week. This book is 80,000 words. You just kind of have to take a leap of faith, jump off the speeding train, and see if you're still intact when you get up. And so, but it wasn't because I didn't like it. I had the best job in the world. To this day, my family doesn't think that I ever worked a day in my life. So.
And you haven't, right?
I haven't. That's why I ended up leaving Sports Illustrated to go hang out in bars for, quote, research. So I've been doing a lot of research all my life. I now know in hindsight for this book.
There's not a writer in the world who has not said at some point, I'm going to give this up and just write books and focus on longer form writing. Very few do it. So the discipline now to leave, as you said, you get into a grind. When you're writing columns, you're feeding the monster. It's a routine you get into. Now you're changing gears. Now it's longer form writing, a chance to kind of think what you're going to, take a deep breath. You have more time. What's that like as far as the discipline now of longer form writing and not that weekly deadline?
Well, for me, it was like a dog who's been on a leash, and when you finally get out in the park and they let you off the leash and you can run around, I mean, it takes you a while to learn that, first of all, that you can make it all up. A friend described it to me as if you're a house that's been foreclosed on, the owners have gone away, they've turned off the electricity, but the dog in the yard doesn't realize yet that that invisible electric fence has been turned off. So he's still kind of worried about edging up to the edge of the yard, and that's the way I was. It took me a while to retrain myself to say, hey, I can make it all up. I know people think that we sports writers make it all up in the first place, but trust me, we had to adhere to the facts at SI. Here I didn't.
Yeah, here you have a novel called The Pint Man. So let's talk about this now. Going from column writing to making it up, making stories. Why The Pint Man? Give us a little background. This is Rodney Poole.
Rodney Poole is
right?
his name. I lived for 9 years in New York. This is set in a dive Irish bar in New York, and I met my wife in an Irish bar in New York, the Dublin House on 79th Street. Our first date was at another Irish bar, the Emerald Inn on Columbus Avenue. People in Connecticut know my wife is Rebecca Lobo, and they can see me and realize that I benefited from meeting her and dating her in a very dimly lit place. So it served me well. And I think a lot of us also have an ambition to have our own bar someday. And this was an inexpensive way of kind of creating your own bar from whole cloth. You could put the characters that you wanted in it. You could, design it the way you wanted it. And my muse was this kind of bar, the Emerald Inn, where I used to hang out in New York.
So this guy's going through a midlife crisis. He's under 40-year-old guy, single, unemployed. He likes sports. He likes beers. He enjoys women, but he's not really got much ambition going on here. And this is sort of his coming of age. His best friend gets married, and now he wonders, gee, what happens to me? And so how much of this is a sort of semi-autobiographical here?
Well, you just described an out-of-work, midlife crisis guy who likes beer and doesn't have much going on. It's clearly an autobiography. I don't know how they label this fiction. Now, it's, I'm 43, so I'm older than this guy, and, and it's set sort of, he's out of work, has lost his job in the corporate world. But we're similar in that he loves words. He gets, somebody described it to me as he gets drunk more on words than he does on beer. And I grew up loving wordplay, palindromes, anagrams. I'm the kind of guy who knows that go hang a salami, I'm a lasagna hog is spelled the same forwards as backwards. My daughter, at 5 years old, now comes home from school and says, hey, Dad, Hannah in my class, her name is a palindrome. So I think it's a genetic thing that she's unfortunately been afflicted with. So there are definitely similarities. And as I say, I spent 9 years doing research, quote unquote, in these bars in New York, and so
not a bad gig there too. So from SI to a seat at the bar
stool. If there's a way to write off your bar bill on your taxes, I'm going to find a way by converting it into work.
Now the real question: can you make a living? Now you're doing the book writing. Can you get paid doing this? Can you make it go?
It's rough. When you write fiction, write your first fiction. It's you write it, and then you try to sell it. You don't get a book contract in advance as you do with nonfiction. You write it. I didn't even tell my agent I was writing this. I just wrote it, gave it to her, had her sell it, and thank God she did it. And I'm writing another one now. I'm finishing up the first draft of a novel, but I wouldn't advise the kids out there who are interested in journalism to do that. I tell people I went from old media magazines into even older media books. So next for me is like illuminated manuscripts as a monk or something.
15 seconds, hard 15 seconds. Basketball, you miss sports. You're a sports writer, going now to book writing. Do you miss sports? Do you miss it?
I always say I don't, and then I see my hometown Twins open a new ballpark outdoors yesterday, and I wish I was there covering it. So, of course, I miss sports sometimes, but I'm still around it, but I love it, and I often do miss being around the batting cage at a baseball game.
All right, we're going to have you back on. Listen, I'm the first guy to interview who did not mention your wife. You mentioned it first. I was going to try not to.
Preemptive strike.
All right, Steve Rushin, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Stan.
The book is called The Pint Man. You can pick it up at a bookstore near you. I want to thank all our guests. Pedro Segarra. We want to thank Steve Rushin, Michael Jefferson, Thaddeus Reddish, Steve Rushin. You can send your show comments or requests or even watch us again at ctnow.com and friend us on Facebook. Become a fan of the Stan Simpson Show. We're on Twitter, too, so look out for our tweets. Lori Perez and The Real Story are next for the good folks here at Fox 61. I'm Stan Simpson. We'll see you next week.